I want you to think about what your worst day at work ever was. Does something immediately come to mind? Or do you have to think about it a minute? Most of you are like, yes, I know. For me, it was immediate. When I was 16, I got my first job. I was waiting tables at our local Pizza Hut. At the time, we didn't have very many sit-down restaurants in town, so Pizza Hut looked very different. It was kind of a hop-in place. And one seemingly ordinary night, I show up at work, and I can't remember exactly what happened. There was some sort of corporate policy change or something. Everybody was upset about it. And long story short, everyone else quit. Everyone. My manager, my assistant manager, the cooks, delivery drivers, they all walked out that night. Now, something you should know about me is that one of my core values is persistence, probably to a fault. And at that time, I was also a hyper-responsible, people-pleasing, goody-two-shoes teenager who was thinking, I don't even have a key to this place. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to stay. I guess I just have to figure out how to make this work on my own. And so there it was. I'm trying to answer the phones and take orders and make pizzas, which I'd never done before, by the way. So if you happened to walk into a Pizza Hut in the late 90s and had terrible pizza, that was probably all me. I'm washing dishes and trying to tend to the people coming through the door, all while I'm trying to find a phone number for the district manager to tell him what happens and figure out what I need to do here. And after about the third time that I'd been yelled at on the phone by somebody who couldn't understand that I also couldn't leave to deliver the pizza, I had to take a 5-minute break and just cry in the walk-in freezer. It's pretty comical at this point, but looking back, it was kind of a rough introduction to the working world. It was not my best day. And I guarantee that if we sat here and shared stories of worst days at work, some of you would have stories that make mine look like a walk at the park. And when we have these moments and we're like, oh, I wish I didn't even come in today, we have to be wondering, is this really what work's about? We just have to grit our teeth and make it through until we can hand it off to the next victim when we clock out? Or is there a different thing that God had in mind with this whole idea of work? Is there something else that work could be? And I think we have to ask these kinds of questions when we're in a series like we're in, called In the Flesh, where this whole fall, we're getting to know Jesus by looking at the life that he lived in the flesh here on earth. And we're saying, when we look at Jesus' life, we get to know more about God's character and his heart for the world. Because through Jesus' example, we get a picture of the kind of life that God is inviting us to live in his kingdom right now. We get a look at what it looks like for us to be human the way that God always intended us to be. And in his book, The Gift of Being Yourself, author David Bender says, if God has come in the flesh, and if God keeps coming to us in our fleshly existence, then all of life is shot through with meaning. All of it. Did you know that on average, each of us will spend over a third of our lifetimes at work? Over a third of our life. As followers of Jesus who have pledged our lives to living and loving like Jesus, we can't ignore our calling to be an incarnational presence in an area that comprises over a third of our lifetime. And the good news I get to proclaim to you today is this. We're often tempted to view work as either a necessary evil or an idol for us to chase. But Jesus came in the flesh to show us that in God's kingdom, all work is an opportunity to reclaim the joy of partnering with God to love and care for one another and for his world. And that's a pretty seismic perspective shift for most of us. But if we could really practice this, if we could live every day as if that good news were true, gosh, guys, can you imagine how much connection and meaning and energy and purpose it would infuse into our lives? Who wouldn't want to live like that? So I think it's important for us to spend some time today just unpacking this good news and see if we can begin to reclaim some of the joy of partnering with God through our work. And to do that, we need to get an idea of where this whole idea of work started in the first place and where things started to go off the rails. So we're going to rewind back to Genesis 2. And in Genesis 2, we've seen that God has just created the world and everything in it. And he's looked around and he's declared that it's all good and perfect and right. And then it says, the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east and put there the human he had formed. In the fertile land, the Lord God grew every beautiful tree with edible fruit. And also he grew the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Lord God took the human and settled him in the Garden of Eden to farm it and to take care of it. So God created humans to live in community with him and work alongside him to care for each other and for our world. And all our needs were abundantly met in this arrangement. And this is a familiar story to most of us, so we know it's not too much longer in the story before things go awry. Adam and Eve snack on the fruit from the tree God told them not to touch, and drastically changes everything about their lives. So let's drop back into the story in chapter 3. It says, "To the man he said, 'Because you listened to your wife's voice and you ate from the tree that I commanded, do not eat from it. Cursed is the fertile land because of you. In pain you will eat from it every day of your life. Weeds and thistles will grow for you, even as you eat the field's plants. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread until you return to the fertile land, since from it you were taken. You are soil, and to the soil you will return.'" So suddenly work feels a whole lot less like a partnership and a whole lot more like a curse. It's something we have to do, at great pain to us, just to procure what we need for survival. And to this day, all of us are living in this post-curse reality. And as a result, we find ourselves either tempted to view our work as either a necessary evil or an idol for us to chase. But remember, Jesus came in the flesh to show us what it looks like for us to become human again, the way God always dreamed we could be. Jesus invited us to begin living in the reality of God's kingdom in the here and now. And in God's kingdom, all work is an opportunity for us to reclaim the joy of partnering with God, to love and care for one another and for the world he created. Which means we have a choice to make. And I think there are 3 options that we can choose of the posture that we're going to take as we approach work in this post-curse world. I want you to listen through as I go through these and kind of see where you find yourself right now. The first option we have is we can resent the curse. Basically, we just hate work. We just get through it. We choose to view it as a necessary evil. We compartmentalize it as much as possible so that we can rush back to our real life as soon as we clock out. And the tragedy of this approach is that it means we spend most of our work time, which remember is over a third of your life, just completely checked out. We're just trying to do what we have to do to get through it. We don't bring our full selves to work. We do the bare minimum. We try not to get too attached to our work or to the people that are around us there. And as a result, we have these blinders on where we can't even see the ways that God's already at work in, around, and through us for most of us, 8+ hours a day. And we miss out on opportunities to join him in what he's doing. So the first option is we can resent the curse. We can resent our work. The second option is that we redefine ourselves by the curse. This is basically the if you can't beat them, join them approach. Many of us become workaholics. We define ourselves by our job, and we begin to devote more and more time and life energy to it. And then we find that instead of centering our identity in our reality as much-loved children of God, we begin to root our identity in our job and what we do and how well we do it or how much we get paid for it. And I think from the outside looking in, this option often appears a lot better than number 1. But unfortunately, there's usually like a trail of casualties left behind the scenes. It can be sneaky, but over time, work ends up taking more and more of the time and energy that we're supposed to be devoted to things like friendships and family and following Jesus. All of them just become sacrifices that are burnt on the altar of the idol of work. So options 1 or 2, they don't sound that great. But if we're honest with ourselves, the reality is that most people spend decades, literal decades of their life in exactly one of these 2 postures. Thank God Jesus came to show us that we have a third option. We have the option to redeem the curse. We can choose to follow Jesus' lead and become an unstoppable source of God's love in our work, through our work. What does that look like? What would it look like to redeem the curse? I think it would probably look a lot like Jesus in the flesh. We have to look at his life when he was here on earth. And I think when we do that, it's real easy for us to look at like Jesus as a baby and Jesus as like public ministry, but we forget all the rest in between. And we don't think about the idea of Jesus like working an ordinary job, which in our defense, I mean, the Bible's pretty thin on details on Jesus' life between ages of 12 and 30, but we can assume what he was probably doing. He was probably working a job. The Bible tells us that Jesus was a carpenter, just like his earthly father, Joseph. And this is part of why people were so shocked when he did begin his public ministry. Check out this scene where Jesus shows up to the synagogue in his hometown for the first time and he starts teaching. See how people react. Jesus left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were surprised. Where did this man get all this? What's this wisdom he's been given? What about the powerful acts accomplished through him? Isn't this the carpenter? Like, this is the guy that built our table. Where is this coming from? But Jesus worked in the flesh just like us. He knew what it was like to put in long days and deal with unreasonable customers and come home exhausted and sore. He probably knew what it felt like to step on a wayward nail or accidentally hit his thumb with a hammer. I wonder what Jesus said in that moment. Like, probably didn't sound a whole lot like what we do when we have those moments. But the pain that he felt was exactly the same. He lived in a fleshly body. He knew this pain. Jesus felt that sense of pride or accomplishment that we feel when he finished a big project. He had hard days when the job didn't turn out like it was supposed to and he had to start all over. All through this series, we've been recommending a book to potentially read along called Flesh by Hugh Halter. And in that book, Hugh talks about the significance of this for us as Jesus followers. He says, when I realized that Jesus had days like this, but never pulled the God card and took a pass at tribulation, I respect his incarnation more and more. I see his redeeming purpose. His job gave him street cred. His job gave him relational connection with the commoners. His job gave him an opportunity to show people a different attitude and a different work ethic and displayed the glory of his character. His job was not just a cover. His job was part of the redemption process. He was breaking the curse and showing us how to do the same. Our temptation as humans in a fallen world is always going to be to view work as either a necessary evil or an idol for us to chase. But Jesus came in the flesh and showed us that in God's kingdom, all work is an opportunity to reclaim the joy of partnering with God to love and care for one another in his world. And if we're going to learn from Jesus how to live as Jesus and love like Jesus, then we have to learn to see our work as a holy opportunity to embody Jesus' posture of love and service. The Apostle Paul talked about this a lot throughout his letters. And if you're not aware, Paul had a real world job too. For part of his missionary journeys, there were early Christians, early followers from the different churches who would send supplies or money to help him along the way. But Paul also worked as a tent maker. And that was part of how he supported himself and built relationships in these different regions he traveled to. He used his job to earn a good reputation. He used it to bless the community he was in and to gain the opportunity to tell people about Jesus. Paul didn't try to compartmentalize his work life over here and his spiritual life over here. He viewed all of life as a holy calling and an opportunity to literally show people the self-sacrificial love of Jesus. And so he has this great line in his letter to the Colossians where he says, whatever you do, whatever, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters. Whatever God has for you for work, whatever task is on your to-do list this week, wherever God has called you in your work life, that's part of a holy calling. That's an opportunity to love and serve others. We see the Apostle Peter later reiterate this idea when he says, but you are a chosen race. You're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people who are God's own possession. You have become this people so that you may speak of the wonderful acts of the one who called you out of darkness and into his amazing light. And guys, I think this echoes our experience in real life when we really think about it, right? Like if you think back over your faith journey, think about some of the people who best embodied Jesus' love for you. For most of us, it was like everyday, ordinary people who were just going about the normal rhythms of life. They were family and friends and coworkers who showed us Jesus in the flesh through the way that they loved and served us. I'd love to hear from some of you guys. Like, do you have some examples? Who were the people that embodied Jesus' love for you in just regular life? Anybody? A coworker? Yeah, how did she do that? Or he? Yeah. Compassion and understanding, especially in nursing. Yeah. Who else? She was just present. That's beautiful. Who else? Anybody else have an example? Yeah, Judy.
This is lots of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When Rick and I first got married in '69, so from like '69 to '72, about a year after Rachel was born. We babysat a Nazarene church in Webster Groves because we went to church on Saturday. So
Yeah.
there was a couple there, Gwen and Paul Patrick. I still remember their name. He was I don't know what his rank was, but way up there in the Air Force. When people would come in to get their kids, there'd always be that huddle of people discussing other people.
Uh,
And Gwen, if she was in that room, I can still see it, she would just say, no, we don't know what they've gone through today.
mm-hmm.
And that has, I have failed miserably in that respect. But I always remember that, and I think that is a true reflection of Jesus. Now, that was a church, that wasn't at work, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Gwen was probably the first thought process of that's Jesus.
Yeah, that's how Jesus loves people. Like even on their challenging days, he sees beyond to what could be going on. I love that. Anybody else? We can take maybe one more. I'm shocked nobody's mentioned a mom yet. Usually those are the first ones. I didn't tell her I was gonna do this. She's not in here, so I can get away with it. But one person I always think of is Connie Leach. Those of you who know Connie or have known her for a really long time, I grew up in this church, and I don't know if it was because their house was the closest or because it was their personality, but their door was always open to all of teenagers, 20-somethings. It was just a revolving door. We probably destroyed furniture and went through a lot of groceries. That was a place where we could always come, and Connie just mommed all of us. Like, she loved all of us, and she just seemed so unflappable by all of it. And I remember thinking, man, this is what it looks like to love like Jesus. Like, I hope I can be like this someday. I hope my house can be like this someday. I think we all have those examples, whether we're sharing them out loud or we're just thinking of those people. But we all know that in every day and in every job, there are opportunities to reflect God's love and to bring light to the darkness of our world. And that's what the regular everyday people that have encouraged us on our faith journeys have done. Because we're all called to work in God's kingdom. Not just the pastors who are or church staff who are spending their full-time work contribution in ministry. They don't do that so that we can outsource our job as followers of Jesus and let them carry most of the load. They actually do that so that they can equip us to be at work in God's kingdom in the unique ways that He's gifted and positioned each of us. This is why our church's mission is explicitly to equip people to become an unstoppable source of God's love that changes our world. Because everything our church does is designed to equip each of us individually as followers of Jesus so we can become outposts of God's love in the different places that we live, work, learn, and play throughout our community. That's how God's kingdom comes, and His will is done in our community as in heaven. And often we get caught in this temptation to just settle for viewing our work as a necessary evil. Or we find ourselves chasing it like an idol, more and more and more. But Jesus came and lived this in the flesh life to show us that we get to live in the reality of God's kingdom. And in God's kingdom, all the work we do can be an opportunity to reclaim the joy of partnering with God and to love and care for others and for our world the way He dreamed. So I want you guys to begin to make it personal. Like, think about what occupies your work energy. And to be clear, I'm not just talking about those of you who have like full-time paid employment situations. I'm also talking about those who do unpaid work, like stay-at-home parents or caregivers, the kids and teenagers who hopefully at least are putting in the work to be great students at school. Some of you are retirees who are working to steward your homes and your finances and family relationships, maybe volunteer opportunities in this next chapter of life. But I think all of us have responsibilities in our day-to-day life that constitutes work, and it occupies a lot of our time and energy. Do you approach those responsibilities every day with a sense of purpose and calling, as if you're partnering with God? I don't think most of us naturally do, unless we're learning from Jesus how to live and love like he does. But imagine what that could mean for your life. Just try to picture what it would be like to practice staying connected to God's Spirit and looking for ways to live as Jesus in every moment, wherever he has you, whether you're in line at the grocery store or you're in a Tuesday morning staff meeting. If you're mowing the lawn or you're prepping dinner for your family. What if somebody were able to see Jesus for who he really is this week because of the way that you run your business? What if they saw Jesus in a new light because of how you serve your coworkers or the way you're able to extend love and patience to a difficult client? God is just as much present and at work in, around, and through us in those moments as he is when we're sitting together in a church building like right now. The only question is whether we're going to do the work to wake up to it and choose to join him in what he's already doing. Because our temptation is always going to be to settle for viewing work as a necessary evil or an idol. But Jesus came in the flesh to show us that we get to live in the reality of God's kingdom, and we get to join him in partnering to love and care for the world that he's created and for one another. We've been talking since the beginning of September about our big goal for this ministry season being to practice living as Jesus, where we live, work, learn, and play. And a lot of us have started using a tool called the Bless app to help us keep that top of mind every day and to be praying for our neighbors on a regular basis and blessing them. If you don't already have that, they have a QR code up right now. Grab your phone, go ahead and start downloading it now. This has been so helpful. When you sign up, you put in your contact info and your address, and then the app auto-populates your closest neighbors geographically. But if you haven't played around with it yet, you can actually customize that list. And I strongly want to encourage you to add some people to your prayer list that you encounter through your work. Maybe it's boss, a coworker, some customers or clients, but people that you spend so much of your life with these people, oftentimes. Add them to your prayer list. Begin intentionally praying for them every day. And as you do that, I promise that you'll start to notice more holy opportunities to join God in what he's up to at your work. Now for me, I'm in kind of a different season of work right now. Most of you know that a little over a year ago, I stepped back from full-time employment here at the church so that I could focus more of my time on the work of caring for my family and extended family. And I still work a couple of small part-time jobs. I occasionally teach here at the church, of course. And I also handle some behind-the-scenes admin work for our family business. And one of the hardest parts of that transition for me is truly learning to accept that all work is holy. It was really easy for me to make that connection when my days were spent doing things like planning events and curriculum for family ministry, or counseling parents, or leading discipleship groups and helping people take next steps in their faith. That was easy to see as holy. It was a lot harder to see the holiness in the piles of laundry and the hours spent in the car sitting at pickup line or driving to doctor's appointments, or solving tech problems for our business, or wading through accounting software, which is my personal work life thorn in the flesh. And the thing that for me that helped the most in this transition was just returning to the same practices that we talk about all the time, starting with just noticing God at work in and around me. And I've been doing this thing the last couple of months specifically, where I end every day by just reflecting back over my day for a few minutes, and then I name with God my hardest moment and my most joyful moment. And as I've been practicing talking over these highs and lows with God, I'm learning to recognize the holy in the more mundane moments. I'm learning to see the ways that I may have missed that he was already at work in, around, and through me in just the ordinary, everyday stuff. And this habit of reflecting over our day to just notice God's presence and activity, it's actually a pretty time-honored Christian practice that people have been doing since the beginning. It's known as the prayer of examine. And we're going to practice it together right now. Hopefully it's helpful to you now, but this is a really portable practice. You can do this on your own at the end of every day to begin to notice more of God's activity in your life. So they're going to put on some kind of ambient noise music to just kind of cancel out some of the background that can distract us. I'm going to invite you to maybe close your eyes so that you can just clear your mind and focus. And I'm going to lead you through a series of questions. And I just want you to see what comes to mind and talk to God about your answers to these. The first is this. Where did you experience tension, frustration, sadness, or opposition in your work this week? Tell God about it. Where did you experience joy, connection, success, or growth? Where might God have been at work this past week and you missed it? Ask him to show you those moments. What would it look like for you to be an unstoppable source of God's love through your work this coming week? Take some time to just imagine that and dream with God. Father, thank you for sending your Son to show us what it looks like to live in the reality of your kingdom in this life, in this fleshly existence. I pray that as we get ready to go out into the week ahead and we go back to the jobs and the task lists and all the things that may have been weighing on us walking in today, that we would remember that we don't have to just view work as a necessary evil, and we don't have to identify ourselves by it and chase it like an idol, but that we get to participate with you in redeeming something, and that we can come to our work with a posture of openness and a connection to you that allows us to love and serve those around us and care for the world that you've given us. I pray that this week you would help us to see people and places and tasks through your eyes, to begin to view the holiness in the ordinary, and to partner with you in what you're already doing in, around, and through us. Thank you for the opportunity to learn together and grow together and practice these things together, and sometimes fail and try again together in community in this church. In your name, amen.